The paradox of power. Zixnax sat in the lecture hall, antennae twitching with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. The Bonian University was a sprawling structure of bioorganic crystal and fluid pathways, home to one of the most diverse student bodies in the known galaxy. It was here that Zixnax, an exchange student from the arthropodic spires of Exeath, had come to study interspecies history. What it didn't expect was today's lesson to completely challenge everything it thought it knew. You're telling me humans avoid war? Zixnax clicked its mandibles in disbelief. Across the room, Professor Gloop's translucent gelatinous form rippled with something that might been laughter if you knew how to read Bonian emotional waves. "Oh my dear Zixnax," Gloop said, extending a pseudopod toward the class's central display. "You've just stumbled onto one of the greatest paradoxes in galactic history." The screen shimmered to life, casting soft light over a classroom filled with dozens of different species, some scaled, some feathered, some encased in armored exoskeletons like Zixnax. But all of them leaned in, curious. "Humans," Gloop began, "are paradoxical creatures. They are, by every military standard we know, among the most terrifyingly effective combatants in the galaxy. But they're primitive," a Nervion stammered from the back of the room. "They don't even use telekinesis or quantum displacement weapons." Gloop's eyes stalk swiveled dramatically. "True, they don't use those things. They don't need to." Zixnax narrowed its compound eyes. "What do they use instead?" Gloop oozed toward the display. "Something far worse," he said. "Creativity." A hush fell over the classroom. Even the normally stoic Stoan students looked unsettled. "You see," Gloop said, "humans have an uncanny ability to turn anything into a weapon, not just blasters or blades, anything." The display flickered, showing a video clip of a human in some sort of close-quarters brawl. The weapon in hand appeared to be a writing utensil? "Is that some kind of mini-laser?" Zixnax asked, skeptical. "Nope," Gloop replied, punctuating the sound with a bubble pop. "That, my dear students, is what humans call a pen, primarily used to transfer thoughts onto flattened plant matter. Unless, of course, you need to stab someone in the jugular." There was an audible thud as one of the Nervions fainted. Nobody noticed. "But surely," said a Logican in the front row, its voice calm and logical, "if humans are so adept at warfare, wouldn't they seek it out more frequently? Statistically, capability correlates with frequency." Gloop chuckled. "You sweet summer hatchling, that's the exact reason humans avoid war. They're too good at it." Zixnax's antennae curled in confusion. "That doesn't make sense." "Oh, but it does," Gloop said, his form quivering. "It's the same reason you wouldn't challenge a black hole to a contest of gravitational pull. It's not a fair fight." He tapped the screen again, switching to archival footage, grainy, raw, brutal, scenes from Earth's ancient wars before they joined the galactic community. Humans fighting not just other species. No, they fought themselves. Over land, over resources, over ideology. They engineered destruction on a scale that was both horrifying and, somehow, oddly artistic. Cities reduced to ash in seconds. Weapons that could split atoms. Tactics that turned entire landscapes into traps. This is madness," whispered a soft-voiced aquatic species from the rear. "No," Gloop said. "This is human history, and why they chose not to repeat it." Zixnax watched, transfixed, as one human soldier in the footage used broken glass, a chair leg, and a wall-mounted fire extinguisher to defeat a trio of armed enemies. No powers, no enhancements, just pure improvisational chaos. "And this was standard?" Zixnax asked. "Oh, this was lightweight compared to what they did when they truly meant business," Gloop replied. There was silence again, broken only by the faint hum of the holoprojector. Then Zixnax asked the question that was itching beneath its carapace. "So they avoid war out of mercy?" Gloop beamed, or the Bonian equivalent of beaming, which involved his upper layer rippling in symmetrical waves. "Bingo! Give the arthropod a cookie." The insectoids in the room chittered nervously. "Humans are merciful. Yes, but not because they're soft-hearted. Because they understand what war costs. They've seen their own planet burn. They've watched friends and family vanish in mushroom clouds of their own making. And so, when they joined the Galactic community, they made a choice. They wouldn't lead with power. They'd lead with peace. Not because they had to, but because they could. Zixnax stared at the screen. Suddenly, every casual human interaction it had witnessed made more sense. The way they joked in the face of danger. The odd traditions like hugging terrifying to insectoids and laughter that echoed like predatory calls, but somehow radiated warmth. It wasn't weakness. It was restraint. Professor Gloop dimmed the screen and let the room settle. So yes, he said gently, humans avoid war. But not because they're incapable. Because if they let themselves go, if they stopped caring, there wouldn't be a war. There would only be survivors telling stories about the humans that came, saw, and didn't bother to conquer. Because they didn't have to. The bell rang, a holdover tradition from Earth's educational system, kept alive by sentimental university administrators. Students slowly filed out, many lost in thought. Zixnax lingered. Professor, it said, hesitating. Gloop turned, his surface calm. Do you think? Zixnax hesitated. Do you think humans would ever want to be friends with someone like me? Gloop's form softened. Quite literally, his outer membrane relaxed into a slow, comforting ripple. Oh, Zixnax. Humans would befriend a sentient black hole if given half a chance. Just maybe don't challenge them to a drinking contest, or an eating contest, or any contest. Really. Trust me on that. Zixnax clicked its mandibles thoughtfully. For the first time, fear wasn't what it felt when thinking about humans. It was curiosity. And maybe, just maybe, admiration. As it left the classroom, the corridor ahead seemed brighter somehow, full of possibility. And somewhere out there on a little blue planet orbiting an unremarkable star, the most remarkable species in the galaxy was probably doing something utterly ridiculous and utterly human. The human way it started in the cafeteria. Zixnax stood at the entrance, nutrient tray in claws, scanning the room like a soldier assessing a battlefield. The cafeteria was a chaotic sprawl of tables, chairs, and far too many species crammed into one space. The air buzzed literally with dozens of overlapping conversations. Smells ranged from mildly floral to violently sulfuric. A group of methane breathers had claimed one corner with portable atmosphere tents. A Nervian was sobbing quietly into a bowl of fermented seaweed. Typical lunch hour. And here Zixnax stood, unsure where to sit, trying not to draw attention. Its kind weren't exactly known for their social grace. Then came the voice. Hey, Bug Eyes, over here! Zixnax flinched. Its antennae twisted backward in reflex. That voice was loud, confident, and alarmingly familiar. It turned slowly. In the far corner, waving one long arm like a solar flare beacon, sat a human. Zixnax blinked. Mandibles clicked once, then again. A human? Here? You mean me? It asked, half hoping someone else had walked in behind it. Course I do, the human called. Come, Monday, sit. There's plenty of room. Hesitantly, Zixnax scuttled over, its nutrient cubes wobbling slightly on the tray. You want me to sit with you? It asked, still unsure if this was a joke or a trap. The human grinned. A wide, toothy, unsettling thing. Absolutely, I'm Dave, Earth's newest exchange student. You look like you could use a friend or six. Zixnax glanced around. The table was indeed full, occupied by an eclectic crew of students from across the galaxy. There was a Jarnet with 3 mouths, a glowing blob pulsing with nervous light, and even a Nervian who was peeking out from behind a potted plant like it expected to be eaten. I'm Zixnax, it replied finally, lowering itself into a seat. Nice to meet you. Likewise, Dave said, already halfway through a stack of what appeared to be synthetically replicated meat discs. So how are you finding the university? Zixnax considered. Overwhelming, terrifying, loud. Dave laughed. Yeah, sounds about right. I felt the same when I landed. Did you know your security scanners can detect shame? That was new. Zixnax tilted its head. I thought humans were more aggressive. Dave shrugged. We can be, but mostly we just want to get along. Make friends. Try weird food, explore. Zixnax hesitated. Professor Gloop said humans avoid war because they're too good at it. The table quieted. Even the air conditioning seemed to pause. Dave chewed thoughtfully, then set his food down. Yeah, that tracks. You don't deny it. Nope. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. We've been through enough wars, more than enough. We know exactly how much it costs, and we know we're terrifying when we go all in. That's why most of us would rather make friends. Zixnax's antennae twitched. But why? Dave smiled again, but softer this time. Because friends are better than enemies. Way more fun, too. He turned to the others at the table. Think about it. War ends with broken planets. Friendship ends with karaoke night and a mutual understanding of what foods will or will not kill each other. A few chuckles. The Nervian made a tiny whimpering sound of agreement. I mean, Dave continued, why shoot someone when you could invite them to dinner instead? Zixnax stared. That sounds dangerous. Oh, it is, Dave grinned. Have you had human food? Another ripple of laughter. It wasn't what Zixnax expected. None of it. Insectoid instincts had always framed humans as apex predators, unpredictable, creative, dangerous. But this one just wanted to talk, share a meal, learn. And suddenly, something shifted. Zixnax found itself laughing, an awkward clicking noise, but laughter nonetheless. Over the next 2 days, that cafeteria table became a daily ritual. Zixnax found itself welcomed, included, even teased gently by species it barely understood. Dave, somehow, always had a joke ready, a bizarre cultural fact, or a story about Earth's absurd traditions. Wait, Zixnax interrupted one day, staring at Dave in disbelief. You give shiny rocks to people you want to mate with. Dave nodded solemnly. We call them engagement rings. The table burst into varying forms of laughter, chirps, hisses, and one unsettling moist honk from the blob. It was fun. Too fun. Too fun. And Zixnax began to see something else. It wasn't just that Dave was friendly. He radiated connection. He asked questions, remembered names, learned greetings in 17 alien languages badly, but earnestly. He gave high fives to tentacles, fist bumps to pseudopods, and hugs to those who didn't immediately recoil in terror. Peace isn't passive, he told Zixnax one evening as they walked back to the dormitories. It's active. It takes effort. You gotta want it. And you gotta work at it. Zixnax blinked. That sounds exhausting. It is, Dave agreed, but totally worth it. There was something contagious about Dave's energy. In his presence, even the most reserved species found themselves drawn in. Conversations happened between races that had once ignored each other. Collaborations formed. New traditions were started. The cafeteria added human-style ice cream socials every Friday. One afternoon, as Zixnax approached the table, it noticed Dave deep in conversation with a Kravian, one of the species known for its historical hostility toward insectoid forms. Just saying, Dave was saying, you've got great bone structure. If you ever want to model for a calendar. Dave, Zixnax interrupted, are you flirting with the Kravian ambassador's niece? She started it, Dave said with a smirk. Somehow, it made sense. That evening, Zixnax sat beside Dave on a bench overlooking the university's synthetic lake. Can I ask you something? It said. Shoot. You do all of this, make friends, build bridges, create peace, but not because you're weak. You're not. Dave was quiet for a moment. Then he said, nah, we're not weak. We just know what happens when we stop trying to be kind. Zixnax's mandibles clicked softly. You lead with peace. Dave turned to look at the stars. Yeah, Because if we don't, we might not leave anything behind worth leading at all." They sat in silence, watching ships blink across the sky. And for the first time since arriving at the university, Zixnax didn't feel like an outsider. It felt human, waging peace. It wasn't a war. It should have been. The kind of confrontation that sent species running for evacuation shuttles and diplomats scrambling for ceasefires. But instead, it ended with a hug, a cup of cocoa, and somehow friendship bracelets. Zixnax still didn't fully understand how it had happened. One minute, the skies above the university turned blood red with the arrival of a heavily armed warship from the Aggression Nebula. The next, Dave was casually strolling across the landing pad, grinning like this was just another Tuesday. It all started with that ridiculous line. "Hey buddy," David said, looking the warlord dead in its 17 eyes. "You look like you could use a hug, and maybe a hot cocoa. Wanna talk about it?" The alien warlord, towering, armored, bristling with weapons and menace, had paused mid-threat. Just paused. Its limbs twitched in confusion. Its voice modulation unit sputtered. And that was all it took. By the end of the hour, Dave had the guy sitting cross-legged on the grass, sipping a steaming mug and talking about unresolved childhood issues from the Third Tentacle Rebellion. Zixnax had no words. Even the telepathic species nearby were too stunned to transmit. Later that night, in the common room, Zixnax confronted him. "You talked down a galactic warlord with cocoa." Dave leaned back on the couch, sipping his own mug. "Yup." Zixnax clicked its mandibles. "How is that even possible?" Dave shrugged. "You'd be surprised how far a little kindness and some sugar can go." "It doesn't make sense," Zixnax muttered. "Everything I've studied says confrontation must be met with force, threats, leverage." "Yeah," Dave nodded. "That's what most of the galaxy believes. But humans, we've had enough of war. We've been there, done that, blew up the t-shirt factory." Zixnax tilted its head. "Is that a human idiom?" Dave chuckled. "Sort of. Look, I'm not saying we never fight. But given the choice, we'd rather mess with people's expectations. It's more effective." Zixnax settled onto the couch beside him. "You wage peace. That's what you said before." "Exactly," Dave said, nodding. "Same energy, same creativity. But instead of bombs, we use hugs. Instead of tactical strikes, we go for perfectly timed compliments. Psychological warfare, but with warmth." He took another sip. "You know what's more destabilizing than an orbital cannon? Telling your enemy that their fashion sense is low-key inspiring." Zixnax stared. "That is the most terrifying sentence I've ever heard." Dave grinned. "Thanks. That means it's working." Over the next few weeks, Zixnax started to notice the method to Dave's madness. This wasn't random chaos. There was an art to it, like when the bureaucratic nightmare that was the Intergalactic Parking Authority came to inspect the university and threatened to ticket every spacecraft on campus for improper space lane alignment. Most students panicked. Dave, he threw a thank you for your service party on the quad, complete with cupcakes, appreciation banners, and a custom jingle about parking responsibly. By the time the inspectors left, not only had they waived every citation, but one of them had joined the improv club. Or the time two rival factions nearly came to blows over a misinterpreted group project. Dave stepped in and said, "You're both wrong. The true enemy is the syllabus," then proceeded to lead a spontaneous protest demanding universal grading curves. The factions, united by shared academic struggle, ended up co-authoring a thesis on collective frustration and interspecies collaboration. It was absurd. It was brilliant. Zixnax started keeping a notebook titled Dave Tactics. Entry number 17 read, "Weaponized cupcakes, effective, may require frosting contingency plan." Dave's philosophy was simple. People, no matter what species, responded to being seen, heard, and valued. If you could reach that part of them, you could prevent the need for conflict entirely. But it wasn't always easy. One night, Zixnax found Dave sitting alone in the darkened amphitheater, legs dangling over the edge of the stage. "You okay?" Zixnax asked, scuttling over. Dave didn't answer right away. Some days, he said finally, I wonder if it's worth it. Zixnax tilted its head. Being peaceful? No, Dave said, trying so hard to change minds. Some people, some species just want to fight. They're used to it. They need that structure. Zixnax sat beside him. You're not wrong. My species used to handle disputes by ritual combat. Dave chuckled. We've done that too. Except we called it dodgeball. I don't know what that is, Zixnax said, but it sounds violent. Oh, it is. Especially with fifth graders. They sat in silence a while, looking up at the artificial stars projected onto the dome overhead. Zixnax finally said, You made me believe peace was possible. Dave looked over. Then that's enough for today, he said. A week later, Dave proved it again. The university hosted the annual cultural showcase, a chaotic, colorful event full of food, music, and unintentional cross-species allergic reactions. Zixnax had been manning the Taste of Exeath booth, serving deep-fried pheromone sticks to a surprisingly adventurous crowd. Then it happened. 2 delegates from historically hostile species locked eyes across the dance floor. One bumped into the other. Something was said badly translated. A challenge was issued. And just like that, all eyes turned to the center of the room, expecting a duel. That's when Dave walked between them, holding a boombox. He pressed play. Out came a beat that could only be described as aggressively funky. Then Dave started dancing. Badly. Zixnax covered its eyes with its secondary limbs. He's doing it again, it muttered. The crowd didn't know what to do. The delegates looked at each other. Then, as if compelled by some universal law of awkwardness, one of them joined in, then the other. Within minutes, what should have been a battle became a dance-off. Delegates laughed, stumbled through moves, and ended up hugging it out to thunderous applause. Zixnax leaned over to a stunned first-year student. That's what humans do. They don't just stop wars. They interrupt them with rhythm. Afterward, Zixnax sat with Dave on the edge of the fountain. You do realize you diffused a centuries-old blood feud with disco, right? It asked. Dave grinned, breathless. And I didn't even pull out the glow sticks. Zixnax shook its head, a gesture it had picked up from Dave. You're dangerous. Dave stretched his arms behind his head. Nah, I just don't like wasting time on hate. There's too much fun stuff to do instead. Zixnax was quiet for a moment. You know it's said, Professor Gloop was wrong. Dave raised an eyebrow. About what? He said humans avoid war because they're too good at it. But that's not true. You don't avoid war out of fear of what you could do. You avoid it because you've seen what's possible when you don't fight. Dave looked at Zixnax. For once, he didn't crack a joke. Yeah, he said. Exactly. And from that day on, waging peace wasn't just Dave's philosophy. It became a movement. The university began offering a new elective, peace engineering, human models of conflict disruption. Dave Guest lectured twice before being banned for bringing a live mariachi band to illustrate emotional sabotage. Zixnax joined a mediation group. The Aggression Nebula started a traveling baking competition. And throughout the galaxy, whispers spread about the humans, the species who could win any war but chose not to. They danced, they sang, they gave ridiculous compliments, and they somehow made everyone around them feel like part of something bigger, something better, something worth protecting. It wasn't peace through dominance. It was peace through donuts, awkward handshakes, and the relentless, reckless decision to be kind. And it was working. The music offensive, to say it got out of hand, would be putting it lightly. It all started with Dave, of course it did, holding a beat-up, questionably legal instrument that he swore was called kazoo and sang the 5 most dangerous words in any language. I've got an idea, guys. Zixnax should have known better. By then, it had already witnessed Dave negotiate a ceasefire with hugs, end a bureaucratic deadlock with interpretive dance, and deprogram a xenophobic AI using nothing but bad puns and a Spotify playlist. But this time, Dave was serious. Let's start a band, he said, eyes wide with manic enthusiasm. Like a real one. A musical band? Zixnax asked, and Tanai twitching with concern. As in, sounds? Rhythms? Human vocalizations? Exactly, Dave grinned. You, me, the blob, the tentacle twins, everyone. We'll call ourselves Nink, Sink, or Swim. Zixnax winced. That name means nothing and somehow still causes pain. Perfect, Dave said, as if that were the goal. So began the most chaotic, unlikely, and somehow galaxy-shifting project in the history of Bonian University. What started as a joke among friends turned into practice sessions that violated at least 7 noise ordinances and 3 interspecies communication treaties. Zixnax played drums. Sort of. The drums were actually repurposed nutrient cube containers duct-taped to a cafeteria tray, but they had rhythm or something close enough that Dave called it punk. The Blob, technically a Bonian but going by the stage name DJ Ooze, handled keyboards. Every note was somehow both liquid and electric. The Stoan sang bass. The Nervion tried backup vocals, fainted halfway through, and was gently repurposed into stage design. And Dave? Dave was the front man, the energy, the chaos. He couldn't sing well, but he sang loud, and with the kind of passion that made people forget to care about pitch. Their first performance was in the quad during lunch hour. Nobody asked for it. Nobody expected it. And yet somehow it worked. By the second chorus of Hugh First, Ask Later, a crowd had gathered. Students clapped. Tentacles waved in time. The cafeteria staff stopped pretending to hate it. Afterward, Dave turned to the group with a grin that could outshine a supernova. We're gonna change the galaxy, he said. One ridiculous chorus at a time. The real test came weeks later. The university had just entered the final negotiation phase with a delegate from the Krask Dominion, a notoriously prickly regime known more for their precision orbital bombardments than open-mindedness. They arrived in a ship that looked like a chrome-plated nightmare and disembarked with all the charm of a tax audit. Tensions rose immediately. Security doubled. The university canceled all non-essential gatherings, including music events. Which is why, when Dave announced NSYNC or Swim would be performing at the welcoming reception, Zixnax genuinely feared for their lives. Are you trying to die? Zixnax asked. I've got a theory, Dave replied, unfazed. Music bypasses logic. It speaks to the gut. Even galactic tyrants have hearts, or at least GUI centers. That's candy. You're thinking of candy. Same principle. Against all reason, they performed. The Krask delegates stood stone-faced literally during the opening number. Their armor didn't even twitch. It was like performing to a wall of bad intentions. But then something happened during the bridge of photon torpedoes of love. One of the delegates very subtly tapped their foot. The second chorus hit. Another nodded, barely. By the finale, a full half of the delegation was swaying in sync, albeit stiffly. One even clapped off beat. Zixnax nearly dropped a drumstick. After the set, a Krask commander approached Dave. That was unique, they said in a voice that sounded like crushed gravel. Thanks, Dave said brightly. We take requests. The commander hesitated, then muttered, Do you know anything by Space Zeppelin? Dave grinned. You're gonna love our cover of Stairway to the Stars? Word spread. NSYNC or Swim wasn't just a novelty anymore. They were a thing. Their music, raw, chaotic, catchy, was getting passed between species who'd never spoken before. An accidental anthem for a generation of students trying to find common ground in a galaxy full of old grudges and new confusion. Their breakout single, Love is Like Quantum Entanglement, You Can't Explain It, topped the charts on 17 star systems. Some called it genius, others called it a war crime against melody. Either way, people were listening, and where music went, peace followed. Reports came in. 2 ancient enemies were caught slow dancing at a mixer after NSYNC or Swim played on loop. A squabble over moon mining rights was settled with a joint concert. An aggressive AI fleet reprogrammed itself to become the galaxy's first rhythm-based transportation service. Dave's theory wasn't just working, it was rewriting diplomatic playbooks. The Galactic Cultural Preservation Society was not amused. They arrived unannounced during soundcheck at the Andromeda Concert Hall, the largest venue in the quadrant, shaped like a tesseract and acoustically tuned by sentient sound waves. Zixnax saw them first. Dark robes, serious faces, official badges that radiated pure disapproval. "Oh no," they muttered. "The fun police." Dave barely looked up. "Hey there, clipboard gang. What's the vibe?" The lead inspector stepped forward, face stern. "This concert is cancelled, effective immediately." The band froze. "On what grounds?" Dave asked, setting down his microphone tentacle scrubber. "You are causing cultural destabilization," the inspector said. "Species that have been at war for millennia are now collaborating, harmonizing, sharing smoothies." "Sounds like progress," Dave replied. "It's chaos," the inspector barked. "We can't maintain a balanced galactic structure if everyone starts getting along." There was a pause. The band looked to Dave. He exhaled slowly, then smiled. "You know what this calls for, right?" Zixnax groaned. "Don't say it. Impromptu musical number." And before anyone could stop him, Dave launched into an original composition titled "Can't Stop This Peace Train." And honestly, why would you? The band followed instinct, habit, and madness. Zixnax pounded the drums like they were fighting entropy itself. DJ Ooze morphed into a synthesizer so advanced it caused 3 minor existential crises in the audience. The Stone's bass vibrated the floor. Dave danced like the galaxy depended on it. Maybe it did. Died. By the final chorus, the lead inspector was crying. It's so harmonious," they sobbed, their clipboard forgotten on the floor. The concert went on as planned. Live across the galaxy. Species that once refused to be in the same room now stood side by side, singing along to lyrics that made no sense and every kind of sense. Later that night, Zixnax found Dave backstage, sitting on a speaker, legs swinging. "You know," Dave said, not looking up, "when I got here, I thought I was going to learn about the galaxy." Zixnax sat beside him. "Instead, you taught it something." Dave smiled. "Not alone. Wouldn't have worked without you guys." They listened to the distant sounds of an encore voices of 100 species. One song. "So what's next?" Zix asked. Dave picked up his kazoo. "We start work on our next album," he said, thinking we call it Diplomacy, but make it loud. Zixnax laughed. "Of course you are." They sat in silence, both knowing the truth. Humanity hadn't avoided war out of cowardice or guilt. They just found something more powerful. A melody no weapon could block, a rhythm no doctrine could contain, a chorus so dumb it made even warlords smile, and that, somehow, was enough. The Galactic Party starts here. By the time Zixnax found itself standing on a stage made of solidified stardust, staring out at a crowd of thousands inside a converted black hole, it had officially stopped trying to make sense of anything, especially not humans. It had been 6 standard galactic months since that first cafeteria jam session. 6 months since Dave had tossed around the phrase, "Let's start a band," like it wasn't a life-altering decision. Since then, things had gone from weird to legendary in record time. And sink or swim, what had started as a chaotic joke with duct-taped instruments and one too many cowbells was now the galaxy's most talked-about band. They'd performed at peace summits, nightclubs, diplomatic standoffs, and one highly experimental wedding between 2 rival AI collectives. Their fanbase included at least 3 species previously listed as emotionally inert and a sentient nebula that pulsed in rhythm to their baselines. Zixnax had played drums on ceilings, under zero gravity, underwater, and once during an electrical storm on a moon made entirely of metal. That one left a scar, also fame. But here, now inside the Cosmic Coliseum, a stabilized black hole turned concert hall, they were headlining the biggest show in Andromeda. The crowd was massive. Zixnax could pick out every species it had once feared. They were swaying, singing, dancing, laughing, wafting, flathing. Dave stood beside it, adjusting his mic and somehow managing to apply glitter to his face and hair at the same time. "You nervous?" Dave asked, glancing over. "Statistically speaking, this is the most improbable outcome of any known interspecies interaction," Zixnax replied. "So yes, terrified. Awesome," Dave grinned. "That means we're doing it right." Zixnax clicked its mandibles. "You humans measure success by chaos." "Not chaos," Dave said, eyes twinkling. "Joy. Chaos is just how we deliver it." As the opening chords echoed through space-time, Zixnax reflected on everything that had changed. It wasn't just music. That was just the entry point. It was the energy humans brought. The possibility they represented. The refusal to take the universe too seriously, even when the universe was pointing a death ray at their heads. Zixnax remembered the first time Dave introduced them as my best friend and co-founder of an interstellar movement. It had no idea what he meant. Now, it did. The music had united enemies, started dialogues, inspired treaties. But that wasn't the real revolution. The real change was in how people saw each other. Humans didn't just show up with weapons or ideology. They showed up with games, with pranks, with an unshakable belief that no matter how different you were, you could still laugh together, still share food, music, terrible puns, still belong. Backstage after the show, while the crowd continued singing Supernova of Love into the starry night, Zixnax sat with Dave, drinking something cold, fizzy, and probably illegal on at least 3 planets. "That was overwhelming," Zixnax said. "Yeah," Dave replied, his voice quieter than usual. "It's weird, right? What is? This whole thing, this idea that we humans, might actually be helping." Zixnax tilted its head. "Why wouldn't you be?" Dave shrugged. "We're not exactly known for our restraint. We've made a lot of messes, on Earth. In our own history. Sometimes I think the galaxy's just waiting for us to screw it all up again." Zixnax clicked thoughtfully. "And yet, you haven't." "Not yet," Dave said, with a smile. "But that's kind of the point." He leaned back, looking up at the swirling ceiling of the black hole's simulated sky. "See, we don't avoid war because we're saints, or because we're scared, or even because we're trying to be better." Zixnax looked over. "We avoid war," Dave continued, "because honestly, it's boring." Zixnax blinked. "Boring?" "Yeah," Dave said, chuckling. "It's predictable, loud, brutal. Sure, there's strategy and explosions and all that, but at the end of the day, it's just the same old thing. Someone wins, someone loses, and a whole lot of stuff gets destroyed." He turned to Zixnax. "But fun. Now that's where things get interesting." The more Zixnax thought about it, the more it made sense. Humans weren't peacekeepers because of guilt or principle. They just had better things to do. Things like spontaneous dance-offs in the middle of shuttle queues, zero-gravity dodgeball tournaments that somehow led to improved diplomatic ties, organizing interspecies karaoke nights where galactic ambassadors belted out 1,980 seconds Earth power ballads and bonded over their inability to hit high notes. They'd turned the entire university into a kind of joyful battleground, one where the weapons were laughter, music, and way too much glitter. And somehow, Galaxy responded. One day, during an orientation session for new students, a small bioluminescent blob asked Zixnax, "Are humans really as dangerous as they say?" Zixnax had smiled a strange, mandible-twitching smile it had picked up from Dave. "Oh, they're dangerous," it said. "Just not how you think." The blob pulsed nervously. "How so?" "Because they'll ruin your expectations," Zixnax said. "They'll throw out your rules, rewrite your protocols, and then make you laugh while doing it. They'll drag you into ridiculous adventures, and you'll end up caring more than you want to admit." The blob blinked slowly. "That sounds chaotic." "It is," Zixnax agreed. "But it's also beautiful." Weeks later, a new crisis arrived, some rogue AI collective bent on assimilating all organic life. Typical Tuesday, Ships descended into orbit. Threats were issued. Students panicked. Dave, of course, organized a flash mob. It started with a single speaker blaring dance like no planets watching and ended with half the student body doing synchronized moves in front of the AI's flagship. The AI hesitated, analyzed the movement, declared the choreography statistically improbable, and requested to join. Now they're the band's official lighting tech. Sitting on the edge of the quad one evening, Zixnax looked at Dave and said something it never thought it would say. "I think your species might be exactly what the galaxy needed." Dave looked surprised, then smug. "Told you." "No, seriously," Zixnax said. "You're not conquerors or saviors. You're instigators." Dave blinked. "Is that good or bad?" "Depends," Zixnax said. "If you like intergalactic chaos, emotional whiplash, and impromptu concerts in your diplomatic halls, then yes. Very good." Dave threw his arm around Zixnax's shoulder. "Welcome to the human experience." A few days later, at another peace summit, this one between two asteroid mining factions, Zixnax found itself giving a speech. It hadn't planned to. But Dave shoved it forward, slapped a kazoo in its claw, and whispered, "Just speak from the heart. And if that doesn't work, play something in C major." So Zixnax did. It talked about fear, about first impressions, about the day it realized humans didn't show up to dominate but to connect, about how they didn't avoid war because they were afraid to fight, but because they were too busy making the universe fun. The room went quiet, then someone clapped, and then another. And before long, the entire summit broke into a standing ovation as DJ Ooze dropped the beat. Later, Dave found Zixnax backstage. "Told you you'd crush it," he said. Zixnax sighed. "I still don't know what just happened. You gave a speech, then a dance lesson, then a toast. Classic ambassador stuff." "I'm not an ambassador." Dave raised his drink. "Could have fooled me." They clinked cups. Somewhere out in the stars, a war didn't start, because instead people had chosen to sing. And maybe, Zixnax thought, as the crowd outside roared for an encore, that was the real legacy of humans. Not their weapons, not their intellect, not even their music, but their ability to show up in the most serious, tightly wound corners of the universe and say, "Hey, wanna have some fun instead?" And somehow make it work. The most human lesson, the auditorium was quiet. Not just regular quiet, space quiet. The kind of stillness that only happened when 1,000 different species all held their breath at the same time, waiting to see what would happen next. Zixnax stood center stage, spotlight humming overhead, mandibles twitching, heart beating in a rhythm it was sure everyone could hear. In its claw, a microphone. In the front row, Dave gave it 2 thumbs up and mouthed, "You got this." Zixnax didn't feel like it had anything, but it spoke anyway. "My name is Zixnax," it began, voice shaking slightly. "And a year ago, I would have fainted just standing this close to a human." There were a few chuckles, sympathetic ones. "When I first learned about humans, all I saw was danger. All I heard were warnings, that they were unpredictable, violent, chaos incarnate. We were told to avoid them unless absolutely necessary." Zixnax looked toward Dave, who had now started softly playing the kazoo in the background. "And then I met Dave." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Nothing about him made sense. He invited me to sit with him at lunch, gave me a nickname, tried to teach me something called the worm, which, for the record, is neither a species nor safe to attempt with exoskeleton joints. Someone in the back snorted. But more importantly, he never stopped showing up, with music, with food, with laughter, with ridiculous ideas that somehow worked. And little by little, I stopped seeing a threat. I saw a friend. Zixnax paused. "When we talk about why humans avoid war, we say things like mercy or creativity. But those aren't the full story. Not really. I think the truth is simpler and stranger." It looked around the room. Humans avoid war because they've seen it, lived it, burned in it, and chose something else. Silence. Total. Even the ever-glowing blob people dimmed their lights out of respect. They chose fun over fear, curiosity over conquest, friendship over control. Not because it's easy, not because it's safe, but because somewhere, deep in their weirdly squishy hearts, they believe this universe isn't something to win, it's something to share. Zixnax stepped back, gently set the microphone down. The crowd stood, not for the speech, but for the idea behind it. Backstage, Dave tackled Zixnax in what he called a sideways bro hug. "You crushed it," he said. "I think I saw the Kravian delegate get misty-eyed. Do they even have tear ducts?" "No," Zixnax replied. "That means you probably ruptured something. Might want to apologize. I'll send them a fruit basket." Zixnax looked at Dave. "Did you know you'd end up changing all of this?" Dave blinked. "Me? Nah. I was just trying not to flunk galactic history. Honestly, this all kind of snowballed." Zixnax stared. Dave shrugged. "Okay, fine. I hoped we'd change something. I just didn't expect the result to involve so much interpretive dance. Or jelly-based percussion, or diplomatic laser limbo." They laughed, but beneath it was something else. Something real. Because it hadn't all been concerts and chaos. There were moments of failure, of fear, like the time their intergalactic peace tour stopped on a planet still recovering from a war started by human colonists centuries ago. The reception was cold, hostile. One protester threw what could only be described as sentient pudding at Dave. He caught it, named it Jerry, gave it a tambourine. Still, they almost left. Until Zixnax stood in front of the crowd and told them the truth. "We can't erase the pain humans caused, but we can choose what comes next." And somehow, that was enough. Jerry joined the band. Later, Zixnax and Dave sat on the roof of their dorm, watching a meteor shower paint streaks across the sky. The kind of moment that begged for reflection. "I used to think fear was a defense mechanism," Zixnax said. "A way to stay alive." "Yeah," Dave replied, "but it can keep you from living too." They sat in silence for a moment. "Do you think they'll ever really trust us?" Zixnax asked. Dave didn't answer right away. Then, "Some already do, the rest. Well, we'll keep showing up." Zixnax clicked thoughtfully. "That's very human of you." Dave grinned. "I'll take that as a compliment." And the trust kept building. One awkward alliance at a time. They started offering culture swap weekends, where students from different species would trade homes, customs, diets. A few medical emergencies happened. Some species really couldn't digest peanut butter, but most came back with stories, with laughter, with understanding. At one event, a young T-variant student approached Zixnax. "I used to be afraid of humans," she said quietly. "Then I saw Dave help a nervous jellyfish deliver a speech by pretending to be a podium." "That happened," Zixnax confirmed. "I guess humans aren't what we thought." Zixnax smiled. "No, they're better." That became the theme. Not conquerors, not saviors, just better than expected. And somehow, that made all the difference. Months later, NSYNC or Swim got invited to perform at the annual Galactic Peace Assembly, a formal event with traditions older than most stars. The idea of blasting power ballads in a room full of ambassadors and ancient sentients was, frankly, absurd. So obviously, Dave said yes. They opened with diplomacy, but with jazz hands, and ended with a group sing-along that left the ambassador of Blurp sobbing into his ceremonial sponge. Afterward, the assembly passed a new resolution, encouraging arts-based diplomacy across all member systems. It was unofficially dubbed the Dave Clause. He had it printed on a t-shirt. Back on campus, everything returned to its usual level of semi-contained madness. The band kept playing. The friendships deepened. New students arrived already quoting lyrics and asking if the rumors about the Aggression Nebula bake sale were true. They were. The cookies were incredible. Zixnax noticed something strange. It wasn't just that humans had changed the galaxy. The galaxy had started changing itself. More laughter, more collaboration, More moments where the first instinct wasn't fear, but hope. One evening, Dave surprised Zixnax with a new track. "No lyrics," he said. "Just music. Something we feel, not say." Zixnax listened. It was simple, gentle, hopeful. It was human. Years later, Zixnax stood at the dedication of a new wing of the university, the Human Studies Center for Creative Diplomacy. Statues lined the path, some serious, some ridiculous. One of Dave holding a kazoo mid-riff, another of Zixnax mid-drum solo, eyes closed in joy. A small Nervion child tugged at Zixnax's arm. "Is it true? Humans used to be scary?" Zixnax looked down. "They still are." The child's eyes widened. "But not in the way you think," Zixnax continued. "They're scary because they don't quit, because they'll storm your defenses with compassion, dance through your fear, joke through your walls, and before you know it, you're not just allies. You're friends." The child blinked. "That's kinda weird." Zixnax smiled. "It's very human." Later that night, in a quiet garden under the stars, Dave and Zixnax sat on a bench they'd carved their names into. "Think the universe is ready for us?" Dave asked. "No," Zixnax replied. "But it's having too much fun to stop now." Dave grinned. "Good." He pulled out his kazoo. And somewhere, across the galaxy, a star flickered in time with the beat. Because maybe, just maybe, the real revolution didn't come from weapons, or treaties, or acts of mercy. Maybe it came from friendship. Ridiculous, unexpected, unstoppable friendship. And that, Zixnax realized, was the most human lesson of all.